Well, thank you very much. Since we started in an unorthodox manner, let's continue. Let's start by practicing some design. So what we're doing here is called removing noise. So we're removing noise from the stage. There you go. Thank you very much. Oh, perfect. Great. Very efficient. Thank you. Okay. To the topic at hand. Let's talk about clouds. Those of us in the technology world are quite crazy about clouds and crowds. We want lots of them to use our products. We just can't get enough of clouds. Can't read a technology piece without seeing mentioned that the future is the cloud. Who's seen this? Yeah? Okay. And it's to hate. Right? I mean, look at clouds. They're fluffy, they're beautiful, right? Or as my friend Mari McCarthy once told me, he said, but they also block out the sun and they rain on you. And perhaps more importantly, the technological kind also suffers from a very chronic case of surveillance-itis. So, what kind of things spy on us? Well, every website that you go to, for the most part, spies on you. This is the dominant business model of mainstream technology today. We watch what you do, we learn who you are, and then we monetize that. So in a nutshell, we monetize you. This is how we're building all of our new infrastructure. This is how we're building the new roads, the new pavements, the new parks. We're building shopping malls instead. So what kind of things? Is it just the web? No. It's things like a teddy bear, for example. Not just any bear, but a Google bear. So a bear with microphones that hears you or your kid, with cameras that watches you, or actually, sorry, your kid, and talks to your kid. Now, this is not a real bear, it's just a patent. But you can see what Google are thinking, the directions that they're thinking of going in. This, however, Hello Barbie, is a real toy. And it has many of the features of the Google Bear. It listens to kids, and it can talk back to kids. One of the designers said, I have no doubt that the person playing with it will ask Barbie all manner of intimate questions that they wouldn't ask an adult, which might sound really cute and lovely until you think about how it works. So everything that your child says to Hello Barbie is sent to Toy Talk and analyzed there. Now this is Toy Talk Incorporated. So when your child is in their room playing with their Hello Barbie, they're not alone. They're with Toy Talk Incorporated. And they're having intimate conversations with Toy Talk Incorporated. Now, this is, of course, not just for toys for kids, but toys for grown-ups as well. I don't know if you've heard of Pokemon Go. Yeah, I don't know if it's out here, but in the US, Pokemon Go, everyone's walking around catching Pokemon. How cool is that? And it's free. How cool is that? It's a free game. Man, I mean, these things must be easy to produce. You could just give it away for free, right? Of course, if you were following the news, there was quite an uproar when they found out that Pokemon Go wants access and gets access to your full Google account. So if they wanted to, they have said that this was a mistake, of course. You know, a mistake kind of in their favor, in the favor of their business model, but they've rectified this now. They said it was a mistake. Sorry. And you'll hear this quite often. Facebook will make something that pretty much benefits their business model, and then they'll say, oh, sorry, we're really sorry you got angry about that. It was a mistake. We'll fix it. And then maybe it'll come back in a few weeks' time or a few months' time. And if you notice it, the mistake will remain. And of course, they did fix it. And I love this Wall Street Journal title because it says, closes privacy hole, but still collects user data. I mean, how naive is this? Of course they do. That's their business. How else are they going to make money, right? I mean, they have for Pokemon Go, they have merchandising built into it. They have other things as well. But, you know, we're talking about the company behind it, Niantic, the ones who built previously Ingress while they were part of Google. And Ingress was this game, I don't know if you heard of that one. You would walk around, there's been an alien invasion, and you'd be walking around the city, and you were trying to reclaim places. But what was really happening was you were providing very difficult to collect data on pedestrian walking patterns to Google. That's what the app actually was for. Right? So these are some examples, and now these examples are moving into the real world. How many of you have heard of Link NYC, Link New York City? So where a Alphabet company, of course Google got so big for Google, so now they've broken it up into Alphabet, and that's their goal now, to cover the alphabet of technology, of your life, right? I mean, my gosh, they're not even hiding their ambition, right? So it's an Alphabet company that's doing this for free for New York City. It's very patriotic. They want to transform these telephone booths into smart Wi-Fi stations for free, gigabit Wi-Fi, for free to people, free for New York City, right? And so you start seeing articles about it, saying civil liberties groups are saying that it's spying on you. But of course it's spying on you. Who pays for this? How else are they going to support it? And, you know, organizations like the Village Voice are actually questioning it, saying that they're building a personalized propaganda engine that watches you moving through your city. We keep talking about smart cities, right? So what are smart cities if we're not in control? But perhaps smart panopticons that we're building for ourselves. Smart prisons, in a sense, owned and controlled by corporations. So what's the tech world doing about this? Like if you read a tech publication, well, they're saying, hey, the free gigabit Wi-Fi is here, and it's glorious. It's so fast. We love it so much. Right? This is the tech world. So the tech world's going, candy! Free candy! It's amazing! Maybe we need to start remembering why we tell people not to take candy from strangers. And this is how technology today works, right? From your smart television, to your wearables, to the things that are on your person, right? To the cars that we drive, to the cars that will drive us to places in the future and today. All of these work by gathering data. Data about the world, data about us. Now this by itself is not the problem. This is a fact of life. This is how modern technology works. But we do have a very important question that we should answer, which is, who owns and controls this technology and the data? Now, if we can answer us, individuals, then there's no problem. We have a democracy. However, if the answer to that question is corporations, and by extension that this data is made accessible to governments and government agencies, then we have a very different type of social system that we're talking about. We're no longer talking about a democracy. We're talking about a corporatocracy. We're talking about rule by corporation. But don't worry, because we don't have to make this decision right here, right now. Okay? Because we made it decades ago. Today, all of our data is owned and controlled by corporations. Today, we do live in a corporatocracy. This is really important because I keep hearing people saying, we're sleepwalking into this. We are there. The real question is, how do we chart a different course forwards? We can't go back. But how do we chart a better way forward? So you've all probably heard of the Matrix, right? Where people live in a tangible world, where they're farmed in a tangible world, but they live in a virtual world, right? They live in a virtual world which they think is real, but they are farmed in the real world, in the tangible world. I hate that word, real. They're both real, right? So they're farmed in the tangible world, they live in a virtual world. The Matrix was so close. They just got it completely backwards, right? we live in the matrix inverted, where we live in a tangible world where increasingly being farmed in the virtual world. And those two worlds are, of course, one and the same. So when we talk about the cloud, what we're really talking about is other people's computers, right? This is the Free Software Foundation. Cloud is other people's computers. What do we call them? We call them server farms. Have you ever stopped to ask yourselves what it is that's being farmed? Because if you do, you might quickly reach the conclusion that it's us, that we are what's being farmed in this system. So how bad is it? Here's a random example from a website. Now on the left, I have a browser window. On the right, I have Lightbeam, Mozilla Lightbeam running. And what Lightbeam does is it shows you all of the connections that are being made behind the scenes when I go to a certain website. So if I'm going to go to Forbes. So you would assume, what would you assume? I would assume, naively, that if I go to Forbes, I get Forbes and their articles, right? Probably a naive but understandable assumption to make. So let's see what happens. Putting in Forbes.com, and look at the right. And immediately, nothing's come up, but I've connected to 31 third-party sites that are not Forbes. Right? 31, 40. I haven't even gone to the main page because they have this horrible door slam, which doesn't respect your experience either. By the time I've gotten to the main page and I started scrolling around, I have been exposed to 63 third parties, other companies, other sites that are now tracking me. As I move along, it's 80 or so. And this is not the worst website on the web for tracking. It's pretty bad. You know, and it's bad for a lot of different reasons, but it's not the worst. The worst that we've been able to find, because we've been looking into this, has 172 trackers on it. One website, 172 trackers. This is the problem. And what happens if you try to protect yourself from this tracking? What if you have what we call an ad blocker? It's not about ads, it's about tracking. What if you have one of those on? Well, Forbes says, I'm sorry, but if you want to see our content, you're going to have to stop protecting yourself. That's the price of seeing our content. Stop protecting yourself from being tracked. Why are you doing this? Don't you care about the free press? I think we're using the wrong meaning of the word free when we talk about the free press today. We're talking free as in cost. We should be talking free as in freedom. So the free press is asking you to stop protecting yourself. And they do get irony, though, because the quote of the day, there is nothing quite so useless as doing with great efficiency something that should not be done at all, which I think is beautiful. It's not just Forbes. This is Wired saying stop protecting yourself if you want to see our content. Why are they all doing this? This seems quite similar because the Interactive Advertising Bureau, the trade group for behavioral advertisers, people who track you and build profiles of you and then monetize that, the trade group, right? Which I kind of think of like as a supervillain club of some sort. I don't know. They must have an underground layer of some sort. Because they've told them to do that. They say make a deal. Tell people to stop protecting themselves if they want to visit your sites. You know what? I think we can do better than this. I think we really need to. Because we are really talking about the infrastructure of our future here. And that's what we're trying to do at Indie, which is my tiny social enterprise. And how small? Very, very small. I am 1/3 of a 2-person and 1 husky social enterprise based in Malmö. And we're trying to make a difference. And we're trying to approach solutions to this. So how do we do things differently then, if this is the norm? Well, why don't we think a little bit about ethics in the way that we design things? What does ethical design look like? Well, it looks a little bit like this. At its very core, we have a very basic thing. Respect for human rights. Now, we fail there, we fail, right? Let's say we succeed there. We can't stop there. We have to also respect human effort. We have to create things that are convenient, that don't require excessive effort to use, regardless of ability. Let's say we get there. We can't stop there. Let's build things that respect human experience. Experiences are all we have in life, and then we die, right? And whether those are experiences with people, as we're having right now, or experiences with things, those are all grains out of the hourglass of our lives. They matter. As designers, we have a huge responsibility to make sure that those experiences are all worthwhile. And if you combine all of these, then you get ethical design. So what does respect for human rights mean in terms of concrete things? Well, we need to build technologies that are decentralized, that don't have a center like Google, like Facebook. We can do this. We know how to do this. Not rocket science. No infeasibility. That are private by default. That are free and open. So private as in you get to make the decision as to what is private and what is not. That is the only definition of privacy that matters. That you get to choose what you want to share with others and what you want to keep to yourself. Privacy is not a very difficult concept. We make it difficult because a lot of times the people who want it to seem difficult have a vested interest in it appearing to be complex. And that's true for a lot of complexity in the world. So free and open so that you don't have to trust us. So that it's transparent, accessible, secure, and sustainable, which is very important for our world. So about the next step. What do I mean by respect for human effort? That it should be functional, convenient, reliable. And what about respect for human experience? Well, let's build delightful, beautiful things, right? So we combine all of these and we have ethical design. And you can, print this out if you want. It's at indie/ethical design. Maybe put it up in your agencies, put it up in your workplaces. Not a bad lens, not a bad filter to have in terms of your everyday work. Just to say, well, how are we doing with regards to this? And people are doing this. It's up at Philips in Amsterdam. It's up at the Filament Group. People are changing it, altering it. Academics are using it in their papers. Here they said we want to see how it works for the human-computer interaction community. People are using it in Brussels. So here's someone who sent me a message thanking me because he could actually use it in Brussels as a framework to talk to people about technology. And it's a very, very simple framework on purpose. And what we're doing in mainstream technology today is we are failing at the very base. We are building things that do not respect human rights. And when you do that, you are practicing a very different type of design. When you're not building for the person in order to use the person, then you are building tools on the backs of people, not for people themselves. And this is how we build mainstream technologies today. So call it dark design. If you want, call it Silicon Valley design. Seems to be where most of it is done. But whatever you call it, I think we can agree that it is unethical. And that is not a bug. We have to understand this. This is not a bug. This is not a mistake or a series of mistakes. This is systemic. This is a system of monopolies where the traditional accumulation of wealth, which is inherent in traditional capitalism, is compounded by a parallel and intertwined accumulation of information. And this creates a feedback loop that widens the wealth gap, a feedback loop that widens the inequality gap in the world. And Shoshana Zuboff calls this surveillance capitalism. That is a system that we are working in today. And here's the best way I can illustrate it for you. With a number, 62. I've been following this number for a few years. It's dropped every year. Oxfam, a charity in the UK that combats poverty, releases a report every January and has done so for the past few years. 62 is the number of people in the world whose wealth equals half of the world's poorest population combined. So 62 people have the same wealth in the world as half of the world's poorest population today. 62 people have the same wealth as 3.5 billion people. This is 62. You can visualize it. 62 people would fit into one double-decker bus in London with space left over. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to close your eyes and visualize 3.5 billion. You can't. We're not wired that way. It is so far beyond the Dunbar number that we cannot even visualize it. And that, in a nutshell, is the problem of our species. Systemic inequality. This is an existential threat for our species. If you are looking for the cause of climate change, it is this. If you're looking for the cause of the refugee crisis, it is this. This is the root cause of our existential crisis that we are going through today in the Anthropocene. So, before I depress you too much, let's change tracks. Let's imagine we're one of the 62. That's a happy place, right? That's a happy place to be. So if we're one of the 62, what should we do? Now, for one thing, there's a lot of people out there, right? We don't know who they are, whatever. So some of them might not have the best interests. You know, they might not like us, the fact that we have some things and they don't. So why don't we start by building some walls, right? Let's build some walls around us. Thick, tall, just safety, right? Security. And I would say, why not? Let's also keep an eye on them, all right? Let's just make sure they're not up to no good, because they could be. Those rascals, 3.5 billion of them, quite scary thought. Is this beginning to resemble something that you might have seen earlier? And hey, you know, a lot of us don't seem to have a problem with the concept of an all-seeing, all-knowing white guy that lives on a cloud. So is it too much of a stretch to imagine that we might be okay with maybe another slightly less magical, all-seeing, all-knowing white guy that lives on a cloud? Maybe we'll be okay with that. You know, who knows? It just might be cool, right? I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, when he says privacy is dead, that's kind of like, you know, a murderer proclaiming his kill, right? And he's not talking about his privacy. He's talking about your privacy, right? Because when we talk about Mark Zuckerberg's privacy, right, when he buys a house, he buys the 4 houses around it because his privacy is not dead, right? When Mark Zuckerberg tells you that your privacy is dead, he goes and he puts tape on his microphone and on his camera on his computer because he knows better than anyone what those devices are capable of if they're not in our control, right? So when we talk about Mark's cloud, when we talk about Mark's machines, you know, we're talking about a system, a very specific system, right? That is built for a very specific reason. When Facebook improves their product, it is not to make the product better, right? It's kind of like the massage that we give to Kobe beef, to the cows, right? The Kobe cows, we massage them. It's not for the benefit of the cow, right? It is to make the cow a better product. That's why Facebook and Google improve their products. And this is not a new business. We have been monetizing and selling people in the past. And unfortunately, in some places, we still do, right? Their bodies. And we call this process, this practice, slavery. So I think we are at a point, a very uncomfortable point, perhaps, where we have to ask ourselves the question, what do we call the business of owning, controlling, and selling everything else about a person that makes them who they are, apart from their physical bodies. We don't care about your physical body anymore. That's safe, for the most part, Silicon Valley, right? Too much storage, wetware, bleh. Very messy. Everything else about you, we want. That we really want. So what is this if not colonial in its nature, right? And sometimes directly so. Who's heard of free basics here? Facebook free basics. So Facebook went to India and said, hey India, we want to bring you free internet. Just like Google did in New York, right? So they went to India. But the people in India were slightly cleverer. They said, no you don't. You don't want to bring us internet. You want to bring us Facebook and a few other sites that you've picked where you can spy on us. So you're really saying to us that the price of our being poor is that we get to be controlled by you. And they said no. So how did Silicon Valley react to them saying no? Well, Mark Andreessen, can never say his name properly, went on Twitter and he said, and I quote, this is beautiful, anti-colonialism has been economically catastrophic for the Indian people for decades. Why stop now? Anti-colonialism. Isn't that a beautiful term? These freaking anti-colonial Indians, what are they thinking? The white man is trying to bring the fire, and you're like, I don't want the fire. Well, that's because whenever a white man brings the fire, there's a little asterisk. Terms and conditions attached. They read the terms and conditions. Maybe it's time more of us started doing that and seeing whether we agree with them. What is this if not digital imperialism? So that's the problem. If we leave it here, I can kind of sense, I see some wide eyes, like there's real fear in some eyes here. If we leave it here, it's a pretty bad place to leave it, right? So thanks, Aral. Thanks for coming to Frankfurt, to our beautiful city, wonderful view here, and depressing the shit out of us. Thank you. So let's not leave it here. Let's talk about solutions. This is a broad spectrum problem. We need broad spectrum solutions. And they can't just be technological. They need to be legislative to begin with. And we can't legislate properly if we don't understand the problem properly. If we don't understand what the nature of the self is in the digital era that we live, we cannot hope to begin to write effective legislation. So let's see what that's like. This is you, right? And this is how we normally draw the boundaries of the self, around your physical self. We've used this for a long time. It's a model that works for us, right? And we have built a body of laws. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which has been ratified into various local laws and national laws. We've built a system where we can execute on those laws. And if you violate those human rights, and we can actually, how effective we are can be argued, but we have this. We have our court system, and we can rule on these things. So we know this. Right? We know the basics of human rights. It took a long time, it took a lot of hassle, and it took a lot of sacrifice, but we've gotten to a point where we're pretty clear about what rights we should have as humans right now. Right? Now, it gets complicated when this little fella comes into the equation. The mobile phone, your trusty mobile phone. Why? What is the nature of our interaction with this device? Is it, as is most commonly seen, the relationship between a master and a butler, a conversation? So I say, hey, my device, I have an idea. Could you please write this down in your note application? And the device says, why, thank you, yes, I will do that. And you say, nice device, excellent. If this is the case, then it is communication between two actors, right? And if there's any surveillance that captures that, it's what surveillance always has been traditionally, signals capture in a communication environment, right? So whether or not you agree with that is besides the point. That's just how surveillance works. Now, what if our relationship with technology isn't that? What if, when I have an idea in my head, and I don't want to keep it in my head, but I want to keep it somewhere else, I transfer that to my device, thereby extending my brain, thereby extending myself to this device, thereby augmenting my biological capabilities with the capabilities of this device. Now, if we think about it that way, if we think of ourselves as cyborgs, which we are, and we have been for a very long time, this is not just with the advent of digital technology, then we need to start thinking about the self differently, because it makes perfect sense then to expand the boundaries of the self to include those technologies by which we extend ourselves. Now, if we do this, surveillance becomes something very different. Surveillance is no longer signals capture. Surveillance in this model is an assault on the self. And, as we saw previously, we already have a body of laws and a means of executing on those laws that can protect the self. So when you hear people talking about we need digital rights, we need an internet bill of rights, we need a whole separate set of rights for the digital age, they're only saying that because they want those rights to be less than the ones that we have today. What we need is for our human rights to be translated and protected and executed upon in the digital era. We don't need a whole new set of rights for the digital era. Those who want that want those rights to be lesser. And we need to be clever about this. We must extend person rights to the technologies that we extend our persons with. That's the nature of the self. One other thing we need to understand before we can legislate properly, and that is the nature of data. What is data? I keep hearing data is the new oil. Data is a commodity. And these are actually quite disgusting to hear. Let me tell you why. Let's say I have a tiny statue, right? And if I have enough information, enough data about this statue, I can take a 3D printer and I can create an exact replica or almost exact replica of this statue. Now, think for a moment. What can I do if I have enough data about you? Hint, I'm not interested in 3D printing you. But I am very interested in simulating you. We call them profiles, right? When you think about a profile, you might think of a sheet of paper in a folder somewhere. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is a living, breathing simulation of you that we psychoanalyze. What do you think those algorithms that you keep hearing about do? They psychoanalyze you. They get to learn what you like, what you don't like. How can we manipulate you to do the things that we want you to do? In our system of capitalism, we mostly believe that that is to get you to part with your money. But we know for a fact today that if Facebook or Google wanted to, they could affect the outcome of any election in the world today. And by their own studies, we know this. So if we have enough data about a thing, it becomes or it approaches the thing itself. The more we have, the better. So data about people, what is that? Data about people is people. We have to stop using convenient euphemism. Whenever you want to talk about personal data, and I don't mean this in the bullshit definition of personal data, where personal data isn't personal data because your name is not attached to it, which is what the European Union uses, etc., and the safe harbors and the privacy shields and all of the privacy policies that you have use that. We can take any personal information about you that you want, as long as we don't link your name to it, we're fine. It's not personal. It's personal, right? Anonymization is bullshit as well, if you need another thing to, throw on the wayside. But personal data, and that is data about people, is people. We have to understand this. Then maybe we can start to regulate, right? Well, if these corporations and in the mainstream are being so horrible, people, why don't we regulate them, right? Why don't we regulate corporations whose core model is a systemic violation of our rights? And some of you might say, well, we shouldn't. We should let the market regulate. The market will find the solution, right? Or it's not our place. We need to be neutral in this, right? Well, Desmond Tutu would disagree. If you're neutral in situations of injustice, he said, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. And I love this. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you're neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. Now, if you need this spelling out, right, that's Silicon Valley, the elephant, and that's us, individuals. So why aren't we regulating? Because we're not regulating, really. Why aren't we regulating? Could it possibly be because the people who are supposed to be doing that, like Neelie Kroes, the ex-vice president in charge of digital affairs in the European Commission, that they act like cheerleaders for startups and for Silicon Valley? Could that be a reason? Could it be that the current commissioner, Günther Oettinger, I'm sorry if I've butchered his name, I'll call us even because he's butchered net neutrality. And he called people who care about net neutrality Taliban-like. To care about net neutrality is to be Taliban-like. Could that have anything to do with his donut? Now, this donut shows a number of meetings he's had with lobbyists. You can see that he has a very red donut. Very corporate. And which corporations? All of the telecommunications companies. Who benefits from a reduction of protection of neutrality? Telecommunications companies. Do you think there's a link there, or am I just making all of this up? Absolutely not, right? I agree. It's just, what am I on? Right? We call these things public-private partnerships. We call it multi-stakeholderism. Right? Lovely, lovely, isn't it? Those of you who know, right? Let's bring everyone to the table, and we'll just be one big happy family, and then we'll decide on something, right? The problem is not everyone's stake is the same size. Google has a very large stake, whereas we don't. Google can send someone to every multi-stakeholder meeting on the face of the planet and still have people left over. We can maybe attend 1 or 2 a year. We call it co-regulation. Google, how shall we regulate you on privacy? Oh, well, I'm very glad you asked, Aral. My colleague Tim here will explain with some diagrams. Whatever we call it, let's at least agree that what it actually is institutional corruption. Not corruption in, here's some money under the desk. Institutional corruption. A system of influence of corporate finance. The influence of corporate finance on public policy making. How important is this? Well, Lawrence Lessig, founder of Creative Commons, made a bid for President of the United States on this one issue last year. You probably didn't hear about it. Trump's more interesting. He's not running right now. I mean him. Trump is, unfortunately. And what's going to happen is unless we can root out institutional corruption, unless we can root out the influence of corporate finance in public policy making, it's going to become enshrined in law with secretive trade deals like the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, and its US version, TPP. What these have are investor-state dispute settlement clauses. Fancy name for basically saying that corporations will get veto rights over democratically elected governments. This has already happened in places like Canada, where the Canadian government made laws to protect their citizens from the harms of smoking tobacco, and the tobacco companies sued them because it was against the interests of their investors, and won hundreds of millions. Already happening. You let TTIP pass, that is the end of democracy as you know it. There's no other way to put this. This is everything that I've talked about becoming enshrined in law. Very hard to change after that. So what about the privacy community itself? Are we free of institutional corruption? I wish we were. This was a conference that I was invited to speak at, CPDP, Computers, Privacy, Data Protection. Wow, they must really care about this stuff. I was going to be on a closing keynote with Martin Schulz from the European Commission, head of the European Commission, a couple of people that I really respect from the privacy community, including Shoshana Zuboff. So I said, yes, that sounds great. I'll do it. And then I looked on their site. Their Facebook, Microsoft, wait for it, it gets better. Google, okay. The United States mission to the European Union. I guess the NSA was unavailable that week. And Here's my favorite, Palantir. Do any of you know what Palantir is? Do you know what it refers to? You do, right? It refers to the all-seeing stone used by the evil wizard in Lord of the Rings. What do you think they do? They're not even hiding it, people. They called it Palantir. And we're all like, yeah, they can sponsor. It's a privacy conference. Sounds great. So I said no. And I was the only person who said no. We got to change that. Because if I have any legitimacy in this area and I stand in front of a Palantir logo, all I'm doing is transferring my legitimacy to... I'm saying if they were that bad, I wouldn't be standing here. Right? If they were that bad, we wouldn't let them sponsor a privacy conference. That's like saying we're having a conference on health. Let's get Marlboro and McDonald's and Coke and who else can you think of? Monsanto. And let's do something on human health. We wouldn't do that. And if we did, it wouldn't be taken seriously. So we've got to stop taking these things seriously. And it's not just conferences. Tor, the onion router, right? Used by activists to protect themselves. Great, great, great product, right? Originally, of course, a State Department thing in the US. And they still use it. But Facebook and Tor. So Tor and Facebook made a deal. And of course, when you look at the articles that come out of it, Facebook says you can be social and secure, right? Facebook gets built-in Tor support for secure socializing. And security is one thing, ramped up privacy, right? That's like taking, I don't know, a car with like blacked out windows to a glass house of some sort. You know, taking Tor to Facebook. You have no privacy on Facebook. And the same with Open Whisper systems. They make an excellent product called Signal, probably the only usable private messaging system that exists today. It's free. You can download it, Apple, Android. But what do? They partner with WhatsApp, owned by Facebook, and they're giving their legitimacy over to them. WhatsApp gets privacy boost. Excellent. Who owns WhatsApp? Facebook. How they make money? Ask these questions, right? What's your business model? How do you make money? So then you get these things. You know, forget Apple versus FBI. WhatsApp just switched on encryption. And on Bruce Schneier's blog, I love this comment because this just wraps it all up. Metadata is the name of the game. Even if you have end-to-end encryption, they're not encrypting the metadata. So they know who you're talking to, when you're talking to, how often you're talking to them. Right? Metadata is really, really important. How important? According to a former CIA director, they kill people on it. You know those drones that America has, and they go and they kill people? They kill on metadata. Right? They kill on who people have talked to and how often they've talked to, even without the content of their communications. So us in the privacy community have to stop being useful idiots and stop letting our legitimacy be used. We have to stop acting like public relations for these companies. We cannot be sponsored by them if we are to be independent and create alternatives. So Bruce Schneier said the NSA didn't wake up and say, let's spy on everybody. They looked up and said, wow, corporations are spying on everybody. Let's get ourselves a cut. So there is no distinction. You might say, oh, but we care about government surveillance, not corporate surveillance. They are married. The solutions have to be financial. We got to be able to fund the alternatives. Mainstream technology is funded and subsidized by venture capital. And here's how it works. We have a fresh-faced Mark, and he wants to create a new startup, but he doesn't have the money, so he goes to a venture capitalist. That's a photograph. That's how they look. It's not an illustration. And he says, hey, in 5 years' time, I'm going to have X amount of million people on my platform. How much money will you give me now for when we sell those millions of people in 5 years' time? The venture capitalist says, well, if you're successful, you'll make a lot of money, so I'll give you this much because I know that I'm going to get a lot more in 5 years if you're successful. The venture capitalist says to 9 other startups the same thing, right? And spreads their bet. This is gambling. Venture capital is gambling, basically, right? That's how it works. But the important thing is you have sold the people that could potentially be on your platform in day 0 before you begun. That's the sale. So what happens? Now Mark has a huge challenge in front of him, right? Mark now needs to convince us that he didn't sell us and that he would never sell us because he needs us to build his platform. Until there are enough of us using Facebook, Facebook doesn't exist. Until the network effects kick in, Facebook does not exist. The moment they do, though, you lose your power. When the network effects have kicked in, if you leave, your family leaves, your whole freaking neighborhood leaves, does not matter. The only time you can kill this system is right there, if you know it. And when the next mark comes to you and says, it's all right, come on, let's do this. What? Prisma. Yeah, look at these Pokemon Go. Oh, yeah, it's awesome. Instead of that, if you just go, how do you make money? What are you going to do? How's this work? That's the point where you can, by not using it, possibly kill it, and by using alternatives. But Mark is very persuasive. So we say, okay, yeah, Mark, we'll do it. And this is the con. Right? He's conned us that he's never going to sell us. And we build the Facebook platform for him. We create all that content. We create all those connections. We build it until he doesn't need us anymore. And at that point, it's time to finalize the sale. That's what the exit is. A venture capitalist does not invest in your business. A venture capitalist invests in the exit. That's what they invest in. Right? So we finalize the sale. And the venture capitalist is happy because there's been an initial public offering or an acquisition by another company with the same business model. If we're going to build alternatives, we have to find alternatives to this. If we're going to build things for the commons, maybe we have to start thinking about supporting them from the commons, right? Or else we get the situations that we have today. I was just reading yesterday that the telecommunications companies are now holding 5G ransom to net neutrality being weakened. So basically, that's like saying you will not get any new roads unless we can build special lanes for the very rich. Right? You will not get any more roads. Would we accept that in the tangible world? Probably not. So why are we accepting it in the digital one? So we need to find alternative means to fund the alternatives. And finally, yes, the solutions could be technological. But this is where design is so important. And I don't mean aesthetics. I don't mean about painting pretty pictures here, right, when I talk about design. I'm talking about everything from the design of the organization and its business model up. Design is holistic. So what's Silicon Valley design like? We saw it before, right? Silicon Valley design is, look, we're shiny. Please, it's free. Take it. It's beautiful. And then you'll get addicted, right? That's the whole thing, is shiny, sugary, and you're getting addicted to it. Why? Because they start making money when you start using their products. Because you don't buy them. They start making money when you're using them. There's even a whole book on it, very, very successful in Silicon Valley and in the US, called Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. This is not a warning. This is not like a 1984 style warning. This is an instruction manual, which I think most people thought 1984 was an instruction manual as well, given the state of the world today. But really, seriously, so it's about hooking you, right? All design is influence. You can't get away from that. But design without ethics is manipulation. And there's a big difference there. It is decoration. And the difference between design and decoration is that decoration perpetuates an otherwise unpalatable status quo. You know something's wrong, but you try to disguise the smell. You try to disguise the taste of it by decorating it. Design has the potential to change it, to make it more equitable. So we do have people who've been working on this for 30 years. Free and open source, right? Free and open source. What does free and open source design look like? Well, it starts out really nicely, you know, with the best intentions and the best core, and then we kind of start adding things to it sometimes, you know, like command line, some options that might not work, but we can do amazing things with it as long as we avoid the blue thing. And maybe if someone built an adapter, and perfect. So this is the problem with free and open source. Now, you might look at this and say, well, this just looks really complicated, and maybe this is, yes, it is to you. This is a perfect design for the people who are designing it for themselves, the people who are building the free and open source stuff, right? We are just not the audience. They're not building everyday things for everyday people. They're building very useful, very important toys for themselves, which are designed really well for themselves. But they can't magically also become great everyday things for everyday people. And of course, we have a very important white male problem, as in we're mostly white males. So what is a free and open source design like? Well, you might say, hey, I'm making some toast. I want to put some butter on my toast. And the free and open source world says, oh, that's awesome. Look, we've got a chainsaw for you. And you go, wow, that's a really lovely chainsaw. I love all the knobs and the controls and everything, but I'm quite afraid of it because I think I might cut myself. I was thinking something a little simpler, you know? And they go, no, have a chainsaw. Learn how to use the chainsaw. You can do so much more with the chainsaw. And if you say no, they go, well, you don't deserve our chainsaw. And take my chainsaw away. We can't do this. Right? When we're talking about ethical design, we're not talking about rights or effort or experience. We're talking about everything that we build must be a cross-section of that. They're all important. They're all important. That's ethical design in theory. What about ethical design in practice? Because I've been coding since I was tiny, right? And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because when I started, it was the last time when we had a decentralized world. It started centralized with mainframe computers, right? By the time I was born, my year of birth was the year of the release of the Apple computer, right? That was the last time that we had decentralized technology. Everyone had their computers, you took it home, it worked for you, it didn't report back or anything. And I remember that time. And it was an amazing time. And then we went back to centralized with what? With the thing that we think is decentralized, the web. The web is actually the new mainframe, only its scale is far greater than an organization. Its scale is the world. So what interests me, what really interests me, is what's the next swing of that pendulum going to be? We're building the next section of that. We're building the personal computer of the internet era. So in practice, what does it mean? Well, one thing we need to do is we need to block those abuses of the mainstream. We can do it through regulation and legislation, but we can also do it through technology, which is what we're trying to do. You can also create convenient alternatives. We need to do both of these things. What do I mean by blocking abuses? We just released an app for iOS called Better, which is a content blocker, a tracker blocker. Blocks them. Cuts off their revenue. Cuts off their lifeline, right? And that's one way of doing it. Free and open source, completely transparent. And what does it do? It implements, it enforces the Ethical Design Manifesto. So we just launched that, and that's one way that we're doing it. It is free and open source, so you can either get it from the App Store, or you can just download it for free from from our source control over there, or you can buy it on the App Store, and that's how we make our money. So if you want to ask me what our business model is, that's our business model. We sell you a thing. It's the best one I know right now. Like I said, we should look into whether we can support commons initiatives from commons. That's important. It's doing really well. People are reacting to it in terms of its design, not just what it's trying to do, the way that it does it, which is really important. And it's also on the web. If you go to better.fyi, you can see all of the trackers that we're blocking. You can see the effect that it's having right now, and that's going to get better. And again, it's just us doing this right now. So you remember Wired with their pop-up blocker, right? Which them telling you to stop protecting yourselves. Guess what we do? We block their content blocker. I know. It's a pissing contest. It's ridiculous that we even have to do this. You know, I never thought when I started out in technology as a little kid making games that one day I would be trawling the sewer of the web to clean it up. I did not know that I was going for, you know, a career in sanitation. But unfortunately, because we fucked it up so badly, that's what I'm doing right now. So I look forward to a future where I you know, don't do that. So we're blocking their content blocker, which is interesting. And only one tech site reported about it, which is also very interesting. Because how do they make money? How do the tech press make money? Think about it. And we're also campaigning against this practice, against the Interactive Advertising Bureau. So remember I told you that's not the worst site on the web? I have a little script that goes out on the web, finds all these sites, finds the trackers. This is it just running on all the various sites, and this is where we get all of our trackers from that we block, right? And it's not a database. So you can go on there and you can read these articles about them to actually educate yourself about them. But we also look at the top ones. So the one that I told you about, that's really, really horrible, right? So there are a lot of sites that don't have trackers on them, that have few trackers on them, etc. But when you get to the very top of that list, you get to one site. And that is our cloud of shame. And that is Buzz, Life Buzz. 172 trackers on there. Using Better, so here's the actual like experience side of it. When you use Better, it is actually 4 times lighter. It saves 2.58 megabytes every load. In terms of time, it saves 2 minutes of load time. Now, it's not 2 minutes of you waiting for it to load, because it loads and then it keeps loading. But it's 2 minutes of time that your battery is draining, right? And we looked into this, right? Because they have statistics. They want to sell their service. And their service is not the stupid articles, the clickbait, right? Their service is to the advertisers. So they give you all of the statistics that they have over here, saying, oh, 82% of it is mobile, and this much of it is US. So I calculated it. I used their statistics. And you know what? Every month, those 172 trackers alone costs American mobile phone users who pay per gigabyte every month $4 million in aggregate. So you're talking about costs, right? That is one tangible cost. $4 million just for additional data. We're not even talking about energy, etc. Thankfully, mobile phones are quite energy efficient, if not desktops. So why are they doing this? Why is publishing doing this? Well, recently there was a case against AdBlock Plus, and Axel Springer, the publisher that you probably know about, was suing them. And their lawyer actually said, the core business of Axel Springer is to deliver ads to its visitors. Journalistic content is just a vehicle to get readers to view the ads. This is their lawyer in a court of law. So what does that mean? What is journalism today on the internet? It is bait. To bait you. But not everyone's doing it. Here's an ad network called The Deck. They actually don't track you. They put one tiny little respectful ad on the corner of the sites that take part, and the sites are themed, so they think that if you're interested in the theme, you're interested in the ad. So it's possible. Another way is possible. I mean, we have the biggest example of another way is possible. Take Google, take Apple. How does Apple make money? Apple is a very successful company, right? Was one of the most successful. I think it kind of goes back and forth between Google. How do they make money? They sell you a product. When they sell an iPhone, they're happy with the money that they got from that iPhone. When they sell a MacBook Pro, they're happy with the money they got when they sold it to you. How does Google make money? They start making money not when you buy an Android phone, but when you start using an Android phone and they start learning about you. Night and day difference. But another way is possible. And heck, it might be even one of the most successful companies in the world. They're not perfect, but their business model is night and day, and we need to understand that. So that's one way, blocking abuses. The other is not ready yet. It's in pre-alpha. It's been in pre-alpha for a year, because we haven't had time to touch it as we're working on Better, me and Laura. But we're building a social network, an alternative social network that you own and control, that is peer-to-peer, where you don't have to trust us when we say we can't see what you're saying, because we don't even get it. It doesn't go to us. It goes between you and the person you're talking to. And again, the important thing, it needs to be a gorgeous experience, right? We can't just take the base. So it is. Here's me signing in, creating an account, the whole thing. This is with the pre-alpha, right? Creating an account, choosing my little from the system picker, everything native, you know, putting in my name, putting in a bio. I don't even need to do that. Misspelling it. There we go. And a code, which is only necessary for the pre-alpha. And off I go. It's creating the account. There's the public timeline that I can talk to everyone about, and I can start sharing with them. right? Unless we make the alternatives as simple as the current mainstream, or if not simpler, then we're not going to win this. And of course, you can talk one-to-one with people, and when you're talking one-to-one, your messages and your photos are going between your two devices. They don't go to anyone else, and they're encrypted in transit. So that's Heartbeat, and that's ethical design in practice. So in closing, cloud and clouds are not the answer. They are the problem. We need a new topology, one without privileged centers, one that is egalitarian, a decentralized topology. So that when Facebook says to share your photo with your friend, you must share it with me first, you say bullshit. If you want to share your photo with your friend, share your photo with your friend. There's no technological infeasibility. So we must move beyond centralization. We must move beyond venture capital, because we're only going to get a certain type of business that can reward a venture capitalist by becoming a billion-dollar unicorn, as we call them. We must move beyond, or at least stop worshipping at the altar of Silicon Valley. We have such a failure of imagination that that is the only model that we think works in technology. We must move beyond colonialism in our approach to how we design things. The only way that we can really design solutions for a diverse audience without being colonial is to build diverse organizations and design for ourselves. That's where diversity is so important. Diversity is not a charity. It is a key aspect of building alternatives. But we must check and move beyond our own privilege before we can do that, because it's very comfortable to build things in the way that they exist today, and with our white male development groups. We must move beyond inequality. And at its core, it comes down to moving beyond bullshit. Because here's what we've done. We have taken a bullshit seed, and we've planted it, right? And we got a bullshit tree. And then we climbed up into the branches, and now we're asking ourselves, why does the fruit taste like bullshit? Well, there's a reason for that. There's only one type of fruit that you get from a bullshit tree, and that's a bullshit fruit. Now, some of us who benefit from this think that if they just decorate the tree, it will mask the taste and the smell of the fruit. But it doesn't. It only goes so far. And I think we can all smell the stench at this point. And some of us who actually care think that if we prune some of the branches, we're going to change the fundamental character and the nature of the tree. But it doesn't. It's still the same tree. So here's what I think we got to do. Not all of us, some of us. We climb down from the tree. We take a few steps to one side and we plant a new seed. One based on reason. One based on diversity, on democracy, on equality. And then we'll get a very different type of tree. One we won't have to decorate, because being built on these principles, it will be beautiful, inherently. And the fruit we get from it will be diverse. But we can't stop there, because this is the key thing. What about everyone who's still on that bullshit tree? We need to build a convenient way for them to join us without going through everything that we did. If we expect them to go through everything that we did, they are not going to get there. Maybe because of ability, maybe because of time, maybe because of other practicalities. And this is important, because this is the bridge between the centralized world of old and the decentralized world that we must build if we want a sustainable future for our species. A world built on reason, on equality, on human rights, and on democracy. This is the world that I want to live in. This is the world that I believe we deserve, and this is the world that I challenge us to build. Thank you.